My name is Sławomir Dębski. I'm director of the Polish Institute of International Affairs, and I have enormous pleasure to welcome all of you at the birthday party. The birthday party of the most spectacular alliance ever created. The alliance which binds together all democratic nations in transatlantic area. Alliance built on values, alliance built on civilization of democratic states, and alliance built on loyalty.
My name is Michał Baranowski. I'm a director of the German Marshall Fund of the United States office here in Warsaw, and it's a tremendous pleasure to see you all here. It's a tremendous honor to have with us Madam Secretary. You are a guest of honor. We are so thankful for you being here, but also for everything you have done, and I will come back to this. So why are we here? We are going to talk, of course, about the history. We're going to be celebrating the history, just as Sławek said. 20 years ago, Poland rejoined the West. We joined the community of values. This was a major step in our political transformation, something that led also to, soon after, Poland joining European Union.
Ladies and gentlemen, the alliance is created by nations. So we have an enormous pleasure, and we are honored to be addressed a special letter of the President of Poland, the President of Polish nation, to all members of this birthday party. And the letter would be delivered by Professor Krzysztof Szczerski, the Secretary of State in the Chancellor of the President. Krzysztof, thank you very much.
Szanowni Państwo, powojenna historia Europy bez wątpienia byłaby inna, gorsza, gdyby nie NATO. Świętujemy w tym roku doniosłe jubileusze: 70-lecia utworzenia Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego oraz 20-lecia członkostwa w NATO Polski, Czech i Węgier, a także 15. i 10. rocznicę przyjęcia do Sojuszu kolejnych państw z naszego regionu Europy Środkowej i Wschodniej. Chciałbym złożyć wyrazy uznania organizatorom tej ważnej konferencji, która jest sposobnością do refleksji nad strategicznymi zadaniami, dziejowymi dokonaniami i nad przyszłością NATO. Serdecznie pozdrawiam wszystkich uczestników debaty i witam w Warszawie wybitne osobistości przybyłe do naszego kraju, aby razem z polskimi ekspertami dyskutować o zagadnieniach, od których zależy nasze wspólne bezpieczeństwo. Dzięki członkostwu w NATO mogliśmy się wyrwać z pułapki nieprzyjaznej dla nas historii, która niejednokrotnie, tworząc w regionie próżnię bezpieczeństwa, otwierała dostęp zagrożeniom dla naszej wolności i niepodległości. Jesteśmy przekonani, że to się już nigdy nie powtórzy. Dla umocnienia bezpieczeństwa Polski i innych krajów wschodniego obszaru NATO bardzo istotna jest kwestia zwiększania obecności sił amerykańskich. Pragniemy, aby obecność wojsk USA w Polsce traktować jako część strategii NATO i aby poprzez umacnianie wspólnego bezpieczeństwa przynosiła ona pożytki całemu regionowi. Polska jest wiarygodnym, sprawdzonym sojusznikiem. Dobrze wiemy, jaką moc ma podstawa solidarności. Kierując działaniami ludzi i narodów, jest ona w stanie pokonać największe wyzwania. Trwałość i spoistość sojuszniczych relacji opiera się właśnie na podstawie solidarności, która z jednej strony daje gwarancję pomocy w potrzebie, a z drugiej oznacza przyjęcie na siebie konkretnych zobowiązań w imię dobra wspólnego i własnego. Kluczowe znaczenie dla zapewnienia bezpieczeństwa obszaru euroatlantyckiego mają więzi łączące Amerykę Północną i Europę. Są one fundamentem działania NATO, podstawą jego siły i skuteczności. Warto zabiegać o utrwalenie tych więzi, a także rozwijanie ich odpowiednio do wyzwań czasu. Dziś, może bardziej niż kiedykolwiek, powinniśmy dążyć do poprawienia politycznego klimatu w relacjach transatlantyckich. To zadanie nie tylko dla polityków, ale także dla ekspertów mających istotny wpływ na postrzeganie kwestii bezpieczeństwa przez opinię publiczną w państwach członkowskich NATO. Dlatego jeszcze raz pragnę podziękować organizatorom dzisiejszej debaty, Polskiemu Instytutowi Spraw Międzynarodowych oraz Polskiemu Biuru The German Marshall Fund of the United States. Proszę przyjąć wyrazy uznania za stworzenie forum do wymiany cennych, różnorakich doświadczeń i opinii dotyczących funkcjonowania NATO i konstruowania wizji natowskiego jutra.
I was with Vice President Pence just last month here in Warsaw as he spoke to the U.S. and Polish troops and said, "The United States of America stands with Poland as a part of the most successful mutual defense alliance in the history of the world, and we always will." In the past 2 years, the number of NATO members spending at least 2% of their GDP on defense has doubled. Poland is already meeting that 2% commitment. The need for maintaining this level of vigilance has not diminished. Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine and continued desire to disrupt the NATO alliance are the realities that we must continue to face. Ladies and gentlemen, if anyone ever asks you what NATO is and what role America plays in NATO, you can tell them we are one and the same. NATO is much more than an organization. NATO stands for something far more powerful. NATO stands for an ideal, and that ideal is freedom.
And that it was a natural progression to have Poland, the Czech Republic, and Hungary in NATO. And one of the great moments of my life, I have to say, is to have been Secretary of State at the time that the Protocols of Accession were signed, and I signed them on Harry Truman's desk in Independence, Missouri. And I did say, when it was over, Alleluia.
For us, obviously, joining NATO was extremely important, because without being in NATO, we felt that we would be in sort of a gray zone between NATO and European Union on one side and Soviet Union at the beginning and later on Russia on the other side. And being in this sort of undefined situation obviously would create considerable problems and also problems for stability. We were always afraid that Poland, being not well defined where Poland is, could be kind of a temptation for Russia to restore this kind of relationship between Soviet Union and Poland, which existed before '89. That's why, you know, we thought that, well, Yalta situation ended in '89, 1990, but the stability of Europe was not defined. That's why we were pushing so much for our membership.
When the Cold War came to an end, the first preoccupation about NATO was not Poland or Czechoslovakia, it was East Germany. When Germany reunified, with the whole of Germany become part of NATO. And that was something the Russians didn't have a legal right to veto, but they had to be persuaded because there were a large number of Russian troops in East Germany who had to be withdrawn. So, I mean, the world has changed so dramatically and so rapidly. But when it came to Poland and Czech Republic and Hungary, I think there was never any serious doubt that admission had to happen for several reasons. Firstly, there had to be a complete reversal of Yalta. Poland and the other countries had to be part of the Europe of which they were naturally a unit. But secondly, when, of course, it wasn't just the Soviet Union had disintegrated. And that meant if admission to NATO had not been agreed, there would have been a huge security vacuum in the heart of Europe. And Russia, not just because of Putin, whoever was in charge of Russia at some stage was more likely than not, given Russian history, to wish to try to limit the independence of their neighbors. And it's no coincidence that the two post-Soviet states that have lost their territory are Ukraine and Georgia, whereas the Baltic states and other countries in Central Europe, big problems with Russia, but they still have their complete territorial integrity. And I think NATO is a significant part of the explanation for that.
I think what we should do, and what is our commitment to the lesson learned from and driven from the past, is the fact that Poland is keep on advocating the open doors to NATO. And I think that we should be brave and bold enough to keep this chance and to really advocate the openness of NATO to the future allies. countries. NATO is still growing in the numbers, but still it's the decisive steps which I think in a strategic sense are ahead of us. I mean, the Georgia, Ukraine, and this kind of strategic, really, decisions that we were very close to in 2008, but then the world reversed. And the world is more and more geopolitical now, and I think we should keep this, this open door, and Poland is ready to share our own experiences from how to build up the social consensus, how to build up the political consensus, and how to make the road to NATO effective, also for the we hope, the future allies of Poland to the east.
Today, this is the fact, and it shows that change is possible, and the enlargement of the European Union and the enlargement of NATO has really transformed Europe. And therefore, to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Poland joining NATO is really something worthwhile or worth celebrating. And therefore, it is also great to be together with you and to say that what we have seen over the last 2 decades with Poland as a member is that Poland is a very committed ally, an ally which is contributing to our shared security, to our collective defense in many different ways. And it helps to strengthen NATO, and it helps to build the transatlantic partnership, and that's something which we really welcome. And NATO has increased its presence in Poland with one of the battle groups. We have 4 battle groups, 3 in the Baltic countries and 1 in Poland. That's the first time we have combat-ready troops in this part of the alliance. Then the United States has a rotational armored brigade, and then we have the site for missile defense in Poland. We have more exercises, we have investments in infrastructure, and we have also other kinds of NATO presence in Poland. So I think what we see is that Poland joining NATO has been good for Poland, and of course also good for the NATO alliance. But we also see that, contrary to what many people believe, or kind of the public perception, the United States is not reducing their presence in Europe. The United States is committed to the security of Europe. It's right that after the end of the Cold War, the United States reduced its military presence in Europe. And that was quite natural, because tensions went down. But over the last years, we have seen that the United States is again increasing its military presence in Europe. The last US battle tank left Europe in December 2013. Now the United States is back with a full armored brigade, many battle tanks in Europe. Actually rotational based here in Poland. That's not a sign of weakened commitment, that's a sign of strengthened commitment. 70 years of NATO, a great success. 20 years of Polish membership, a great success. And there are many more successful years to come.
Truman got it right. Neighborly solidarity is critical for the future of transatlantic relationship, for the security of Poland and for the security of all NATO countries. That is why Poland continues to support all of the allies across NATO, be it in the east or south, in Latvia, in Lithuania, in Romania, in Kosovo, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. Indeed, over the years, we participated in almost all NATO missions and operations. That sense of solidarity is also the reason why NATO needs to keep its door open. Our partners, also in Georgia and Ukraine, deserve our open mind and an opportunity to join it. The example of countries that so far joined the alliance, including Poland, proves beyond doubt that accession can bring stability, progress, and prosperity. These 3 organizing principles, unity, solidarity, and resolve, lay at the heart of what we are and why we are here. These principles stand at the cornerstone of peace, stability, and our prosperity. Today, when the number of allies is about to reach 30 and the times are uncertain, our task has to be to continue engaging in dialogue and debate based on this very principle, just as Europe needs the United States. Together, not separately, we will be able to protect our values and defend our freedom.
If we hadn't NATO today, we would have to invent it. This is my perception of NATO. It is more necessary than ever as an alliance fighting for the same values. History of the last 70 years, NATO has always been the vanguard of our common values, and I think we should name them again, at least a set of them. Democracy. I mean, your country has been fighting for democracy so hard and so long, just this value of democracy. Freedom. You know what freedom means in a completely different tone. The dignity of every single human being. And one of the most important values we are fighting for is the rule of law. We have a set of international laws out of a good reason, because we come out of 2 horrible world wars, and then we were aware of the fact that we need a set of international laws everybody has to abide to. This change in security environment in 2014 and the years to come did also change the threat perception in our countries. And when you were referring to contribution and burden sharing, first of all, the Americans were right, and they are right to ask us to do more. I remember the summit in Wales. I was, since a few months, defense minister, when we set the commitment to aim to move towards 2%. And yes, the speed is different, and congratulations on your investment in your defense budget. But I want, if I may, also add, apart from the investment in the national defense, a crucial point is also capabilities and contributions. So Germany is the 2nd largest troop contributor to NATO, right after the United States. I know we have to do more what investment is concerned, but this picture shows that all of us have understood after this serious crisis that we have to move forward and to change things.
So the question is how democracies can defend themselves. And indeed it is a crucial question, because when Russia exports gas through Nord Stream 1 or Nord Stream 2 in future, they use revenues not in order to improve democracy or the conditions of living of society, but to create a robust military instrument to pursue policy which is against our values. You, Minister, said very important word. GDP of Italy is higher than Russia, but how it is that Russia's military might is much stronger than Italy? And this is the question. So Russia will will interfere to the internal affairs of democratic countries in order to weaken them and to win that competition, because they perceive that from that perspective. Conclusion would be that not only military means, or they are not the most important. The most important is general influence on economies of countries which create a threat to us. Therefore, we have to have a holistic approach to look how Nord Stream contributes to building up military capability of Russia. Sanctions, yes, but maybe these sanctions should be more broader and more robust. It is the problem. So you have to, because it is, you can change economic might into the military one. So you have to block the possibility to develop economically for those countries who might create a threat. So that is my main point. But of course, in practice, you have to have military forces to deter and even to defend a country.
It is clear that the Russian Federation is in breach of the INF Treaty. For any treaty to be implemented fully, you require all sides of the legal instruments to be respected and implemented by all. So if Russian Federation deploys SSC-8 missiles threatening European allies, and European allies don't have such missile systems in the continent, it shows us that there is a clear violation of it, and the unity of allies have been shown on different occasions in this December by the foreign ministers, but also in February by the defense ministers. The council statements clearly show the unity, and we are definitely we are going to evaluate how we can tackle this situation with certain measures to be put in place. It does not necessarily require any deployments in terms of land-based missiles, and Secretary General was clear on that. But we have to be prepared for a situation in which INF Treaty is no longer in place. NATO plans exercises well in advance, and I know that there will be a new series of exercises in the future. I know that in 2021, for instance, there will be a big exercise, and they are high-profile exercises, also providing us with the communication opportunity to make sure that there is full transparency, not to create any situation in which we may risk miscalculation. Therefore, to communicate the intention of NATO is also something important, not only training our forces, but also to communicate what we intend to do.
The Eastern threat to our countries, to our flag, is existential, because Russia has real ambitions to change the security architecture and to come back to the position of the Soviet Union, controlling a number of states surrounding Russia, subordinate them, or even conquer and include together in some new structures like former Soviet Union. So we have to pay attention, different attention to different threats, although, of course, still keeping the approach 360 degrees. Now, relating to your specific question on eastern flank, because the Russian threat is growing and ambitions are growing, and even imperialistic ambitions are growing, so we have to enforce the presence, military presence on the eastern flank. We need passive defense and active defense. Passive defense could be more radars, more reconnaissance instrument, more drones, more AWACS system, radar system, just to monitor the situation around eastern flank, just to be informed in advance what are the steps or what are the preparations on the other side of our borders. We need also active defense. That means more troops to answer such threats. But the most important is that we need command structure and this doctrine to create defense of this flag. Because bringing more troops without a doctrine, without command structure, what we can do, we can exercise the art of shooting, the art of digging trenches, but not the real art of planning defense of the eastern flank. First of all, we need a united position of our countries. And I know that there is a disagreement because a few months earlier when when our Commission of Foreign Affairs from Parliament visited Berlin, and we had a chance to meet our partners from the German Commission for Foreign Affairs, The predominant mood in German Commission was that it was Donald Trump who is violating INF Treaty. You know, no, this is Russia which is violating the treaty since 2014, 2013. It was already recognized by the previous President of the United States, Barack Obama. So we need to have a united position among ourselves. Then, if we have a united position, we can still put the pressure on Russia to come back to the INF Treaty. If it fails, of course, we have to defend, we have to adopt additional steps. Doesn't have to be immediately to reinforce the presence of nuclear forces on the territory of Europe. There are a number of conventional steps which can be taken to prevent, to deny Russia possibility to attack Europe from the European territory of Russia.
Think about challenges from the East, we should think of the Far East, because the conversation increasingly, I think, within the transatlantic space will be about China. Certainly that's happening in the United States, where one of the few areas of bipartisan consensus in foreign policy that we've seen really strengthen over the last 2 years has been on the multiplicity of threats the U.S. faces from China. Again, this is an area where NATO will have certain competencies and then a lot of the areas where it's not going to have anything to do with NATO. When we think of cyber, which has been mentioned several times already during this conference, no question then that there's a profound threat from Russia, a profound threat from non-state actors like ISIS, but one cannot tackle the cyber threat issue without addressing what's coming from China. This is an area where we've already seen some division between the U.S. and some European partners. Poland's not one of them right now, but on 5G in particular. That's not necessarily a NATO issue, but I think this has the potential to continue to be a bit of an irritant in the transatlantic relationship. But I think just as the U.S. is working to try to engage more deeply with European partners in dealing with the China threat, whether in terms of their political influence or their economic influence or the way that they are trying to transform technology, we should be talking to one another more intensively in the NATO context as well as outside of NATO about the military threats that they pose. And this is an area where INF could come in. And I thought it was important that the German defense minister raised China in that context, and perhaps as a way to try to do a follow-on to INF deal with Russia if we bring the Chinese threat into that discussion. I don't hold a lot of confidence that that would work, but I think it's a positive step that that's the conversation here, because one cannot walk into a conference anywhere in Washington and not have the conversation come back to China, because that is, as I said, increasingly being seen as the paramount threat to the United States.
Basically, the conversation is broken between not only Berlin and Washington, but also Paris and Washington, and London and Washington. So there's a problem. This is a big shock for Germany, and the conversation in Berlin right now is much more about, do we have a plan B? What if? What if the security guarantee is not there anymore? And this concern has turned Germany to move towards France. There was always in Germany this second option, let's call it second option, the 50s, 60s, 70s. We all know that the European defense community was a real project in the 50s until the French Senate voted against it. Or that was option number one, because the French wanted it. And only if this project failed, Germany entered NATO. And now it's kind of rethink, in some circles, SPD circles, but broadly a sense that we need to strengthen our relationship with France, because ultimately that's the way for European defense, because of its size and global ambition. So I I don't think that anybody in Germany thinks that there is anybody serious thinks that we should move ahead towards a European army that could replace NATO. And adding to this is also what François Eisbourg once called, one should not turn a hedge into a wedge. So if you try, if you try to build something, the Americans or Trump may just say, fine, okay, then finally we can go and focus on nation building at home. So I don't think it's an imminent project. I don't see this project anywhere among serious people.
European army is absolutely out of the question. And the French are certainly not willing to have a European army. We are willing to have a European pillar within NATO. And now the question is, in the past, we had experience in Bosnia at a time where the US was not interested. It was saying, Baker was saying, we don't have a dog in the fight of Bosnia. And we said at that time, it was not a question of nuclear or so forth. So we began to press the White House to get into Bosnia in order to ensure the credibility of the transatlantic relationship at that time, because it was in danger in Europe. I was shocked to listen to the minister at the previous challenge when he said we should shift German troops, US troops in Germany to Poland. Why it will be more efficient in terms of deterrence if they are in Poland or if they are in Germany, if we consider that there is a solidarity within the alliance?
I think this is really a notion that lacks completely any military capability as a foundation, lacks political understanding, political consensus as a background for it, and is fundamentally very counterproductive. I think it's very efficient if we want to if we want to increase the noise, if we want to divert attention away from the strategic priorities, or if we want to sort of increase the massing of the scenery in front of us. What we have to see is the real priorities ahead of us, the lacks that we need to strengthen, the capabilities in the alliance itself, that we have touched upon a little bit, and the problems of, for instance, the unfinished, what we call at SIPA, the unfinished business of the enlargement process itself. Because we did extend, with the enlargement of the NATO member states, the treaty itself and the political cooperation and the political infrastructure of NATO. We did not extend the military infrastructure of the same alliance, and I very much believe that this is a discussion, and I very much was encouraged what Benoit said. I think this is something that is the priority discussion for the years ahead of us, to focus on, yes, would that and how would that strengthen alliance stability and security, to rethink the permanent positioning of US forces in the Central East European area. And I think these are the valid discussions, issues that we need to focus on, the mobility, the speed, the military Schengen. Yes, they are real issues ahead of us. Everything else is really just counterproductive.
Some of the aspects that we are dealing with could be referred to the history of the alliance going back to 60s or 70s. In fact, one of the recent initiatives of the SACEUR has been called a new flexible response, for instance, which is the strategy from the 60s. I will not get into details because of the secrecy of the issue, but it is the fact that the historical legacy certainly plays a role, and some of the narratives are coming back. And this is the fact, indeed, we are in the midst of the process that's called the adaptation of NATO, and it could be simplified to the basically mixing old and new, but one could actually argue what is old and new, because 10 or 15 years ago we were defining old threats as classic military aggression or classic military competition between the states, and new, so-called new threats were terrorism, cyber. Cyber is somehow always new, but it's with us for some time. But right now we are. I mean, the novelty is the fact that we are again gearing up to be able to tackle a large-scale military competition, and the ambition is to do it without losing the ability to, without losing lessons that we learned throughout since 1999, for instance, when the security concept that was adopted in April 1999, right after Poland joined NATO, which very much sort of opened a chapter in NATO history when NATO dealt mostly with crisis management, out-of-area operations, you know, the contingency plans and collective defense were defined as something of the past. And right now we are trying to restore some of that.
Why do we want more American troops in Poland? That's the easy variant. But now I twist the ball a little bit, and let me formulate this question following. What would be the difference between, for Polish defense posture, regarding, you know, two options, with American troops enhanced in Poland and without them? What's the difference from our defense policy point of view?
Of course, US is the, you know, dominant ally within NATO, the ally with the full capacity, you know, across the portfolio of capabilities, the nation with global interest, and basically, you know, other allies do not possess matching capabilities at the moment. So this is why we are talking first to the US, and the US has been quite responsive in recent years. Let me just mention the EDI project with the ABCT armored brigade rotating with other elements coming in. So they seem to be the right address. And what that would bring, in order to give you an answer, I will just refer to the strategic defense review that I was given a privilege to chair, which was finalized 2 years ago. It was in a moment where the EDI project only started to be implemented. The EFP only started to be implemented. We didn't have a clarity. What is the, you know, what's the prospect for NATO and allied troops in terms of the presence in Poland? So we needed to plan for worst case scenario, you know, no notice, short notice scenarios. That led to the posture where we were prioritizing the, you know, efficiency, effectiveness in terms of the territorial defense. And this sometimes gives you a very kind of static posture where, you know, we might be quite effective, I mean, more effective, much more effective in defending the Polish soil. We might be a little bit less effective in terms of coming to the aid of other allies. And the US presence in some substantive numbers and forms could lead to a situation of a symbiotic development of our forces, synergistic development of our forces, where, you know, some of the capabilities are being brought by the US to the theater. We bring some other capabilities, but we can also be helpful elsewhere. You know, having this guarantee on our soil, we can optimize our forces to be more active, I know, in the Baltics, in the Balkans, you know, possibly also in out-of-area operations. However, I do still think that our specialty should be, since we are the, you know, central country in the eastern flank, we should be, you know, take this burden on our shoulders.